and gentlemen, Lisa Gandolfo. Lisa, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Lisa's story is incredible. She spent the last 44 years to avenge her best friend's death. Her best friend was the second wife of a famous race car driver, John Paul, and John Paul was also one of the biggest drug smugglers, marijuana smugglers back in the 80s. He's been on the run. He's been tracked all the way through Europe, Thailand. He did 12 years in Leavenworth.
12 and a half a sentence.
He had 25 years in Leavenworth
prior
for the drug smuggling.
It was for attempted murder on Stephen Carson.
Okay, so he had shot a guy 5 times, so that's why he went to Leavenworth.
Yes.
What about the drug smuggling charges? Did he ever get minor?
That was part of it,
Yeah.
yes, and tax evasion.
Yeah.
And, he fled the country.
Right.
So, and he left on a fake passport. Then, and that was in 1986, that Interpol was able to extradite him back based on that, not on attempted murder charges, because he went to a foreign country using a fake passport.
Now, the thing is, and I've talked to Lisa extensively about this, and she has her own podcast, which we'll put up the website and the podcast where you can get into way more in depth. Well, we're going to do everything we can to cover it, but absolutely, you'll see that in our on the page. But at first, when Chalice went missing, nobody believed it because they were semi-divorced. John Paul and her, it was his second wife. He had divorced his first wife, which he had 2 children with, and was divorcing her. And in the middle of the divorce, he invited her to come back, try to reconnect, and took her sailing. Is that right?
Yeah, and let me correct, he had 3 children with his first wife.
Oh, right. It was
Linda, Joyce, McGaughey, Paul.
Yeah.
And that was John Paul Jr. was the oldest.
Right.
And then it was Tanya Paul.
Right.
And then Leslie Michael Paul. He goes by Michael Paul. That's the youngest son.
Right. And the family's had some medical issues that actually, what was it, Huntington's disease?
Yes.
Yeah, that actually killed his first wife and was John Paul Jr. his first son? Or
that was his first son.
Right, but his daughter was the oldest child.
No, he was the oldest.
Oh, John Paul Jr. was.
And that was actually Joyce, and her mother had Huntington, so the gene was passed down to her. Therefore, it was passed down to 2 of her 3 children. Wow. Michael Paul didn't get the gene, so he's more genetically linked to his father.
Right, I got it.
Less the bad stuff.
right. The father was, well, we're going to find out more about it. But why don't you tell us John Paul's, because you're such an expert on this. You've done so much research and spent, the majority of your life doing this.
I'm 44 years of my adult life. Yes.
Yeah. So how old was Chalice when she went missing?
Well, I met Chalice in the summer of 1981 in Palm Beach Yacht Club. And she was separated by John Paul. And she came to Palm Beach because she heard it was the place for the rich and famous. She was watching Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. You remember this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Robin Leach.
Yeah.
I watch it all the time.
So, she didn't decide. She couldn't make up her mind what she wanted to do. She wanted to follow through with the divorce, try to work it out or whatever. So she resided in Palm Beach, and we became like instant friends. And she confided in me a lot of stuff. And it was... At that summertime, I decided I was going to move to New York City to pursue my fashion design career. And she stayed in Palm Beach. She had rented an apartment, and then she moved back to Atlanta. She had already been in a film made by Burt Reynolds. It was Cannonball Run.
Oh, really? She was in Cannonball Run?
Yes. And John Paul used his high-performance cars in there. And there's scenes that we freeze-framed and did slow motion of all the scenes she was in. And she was a stand-in for Adrienne Barbeau.
Really?
The leads, yes.
Sure. At the beginning of the movie, Adrienne Barbeau and who's the other actress I'm thinking, they come by in a black Countach Lamborghini, back up. There's a stop sign that's a sign that says 55. Because remember,
right.
If you don't know, there was a point where the speed limit was 55. They get out.
They paint it.
They painted a big X circle on it while they're being chased by the police, and then they take off, and the music kicks back in. I love the movie. I saw that scene recently.
They had like Dom DeLuise.
Yeah.
They had
everybody. Sammy Davis Jr. All the cameos were in that movie.
Yes.
But she was really pretty. She was a stewardess, and stewardesses back in those days, in the very beginning of, well, Come Fly With Me, the Pan Am girls, they really picked the pretty ladies to be stewardesses.
Exactly.
There was no stewards. The stewards weren't that popular until, they opened it up to men, but it was really women that, did 99% of the airline steward stuff.
Yeah.
And
So the public doesn't know what she did. She was a flight attendant for Delta Airlines at the time.
And you said that her family, she didn't come from wealth. She kind of came from the other side of the tracks. So she probably got overwhelmed by John Paul's drug money. But let Lisa tell you, John Paul actually made his fortune as in the stock market. He worked for one of the big firms. And
he sold hedge funds. He worked for Putnam Management.
Yeah, big firm.
He moved to Boston, and he did very well. He made Mattel stock what it is today, and also Kentucky Fried Chicken. A lot of people don't realize that he was a millionaire. He didn't need to be,
a drug
smuggler at all. But he got the bug for racing because he was living in Muncie and he used to go to Indianapolis 500. And that's how he got the bug and decided he was going to become a race car driver. And then, it escalated from there, and he eventually built his own Porsches out of Lawrenceville, Georgia. But
for those of you that are familiar with racing or don't know, Richard Petty has a special blue that you see all the Richard Petty cars. It's called Richard Petty Blue. So John kind of snuck in and took a lighter blue and made that his color. So all his race cars, and he only raced, mostly Porsches. He built phenomenal race cars. Him and his son won the 24 hours of some big race, Daytona, and I think also Sebring, yeah, two of the biggest races in the world. And he came from, but he was, from what I learned from Lisa, he really came from war-torn Europe. He was born in 1939, so right in the middle of he was from the Netherlands, right?
Originally from Holland.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was so poor that he would pick up cigarettes off the ground and try to resell them because they're, during World War II, right after World War II, there was nothing. Europe was, war-torn Europe, and Americans were dropping in, relief packages. We really had to rebuild Europe if you do your homework after World War II. So there was no money. So he came to America and got a scholarship to a fancy school, didn't he?
Well, what happened when he was a kid?
Yeah.
And I've done extensive research on, every search engine you can imagine, including newspapers.com, and found out that he actually stole a tube of toothpaste in Indiana where he was going to school. And then the next day, they made an announcement in the city paper saying that he won the honor roll. And then the same paper, I find that, he got a scholarship to Harvard. I mean, how many people get scholarships to Harvard? But he was extremely smart. He was a numbers guy. He knew math incredibly well. But that's how he started his career.
But I have to tell you, you've done
financing.
I'm not to interrupt you, but you've done so much homework. So I have to ask the human psyche part. Think about this. This is a guy that came up through Europe, poor, pulling cigarette butts off the street and reselling them. Found his way to America, changed his name from its European, I forgot what it was.
It was called, his Wikipedia page was wrong. And I actually, influenced that to put the right date of birth, because Department of Corrections obviously had it correct. But in Europe, they put usually the month before.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. I mean, the day before the month,
right,
as opposed to American. So
right.
He was born on March 12th, 1939. Wikipedia for years said it was the opposite.
Yeah,
it's
right.
December 3rd. But anyways.
But so here's the interesting psyche. Here's a guy that comes from war-torn Europe, poor, comes to America, and he's brilliant, right? He makes it into Harvard on a full scholarship. Yet he's a drug smuggler, which I understand that because he wanted to race cars, and whatever money he made wasn't going to, racing cars is really expensive. But a drug smuggler and a supposed murderer, alleged. Lisa's making me use that, but I don't think that's correct. But I'm going to go with that to protect us from any possible lawsuits or. But the human psyche is really he could be. His life story could be a class at Harvard. in the human psyche, and you've been involved in this story for so long. Do you think that has it gotten to you? Has it gotten to your psyche a little bit? Do you think, or you've been able to separate? I mean, do you wake up at night sometimes thinking about him or the actions besides your friend Chalice?
Well,
Besides
it's
that?
interesting you say that I wake up because, I mean, this is we don't have the actual document, but I do have a reliable source. It's law enforcement that reinforced my concern one morning, which was the morning Monday, September 29th. And I made a phone call and said, what's the status? Because we're kind of jumping ahead.
Well, let's go. He was on the run for years. He
Right.
did 25. Let me just go so I can clarify. He had got sentenced to 25 years at Leavenworth. He did 12 and a half years. When you get out, you have to, get a job sweeping floors or whatever they tell you to do as a probation officer. And you have to do your next 12 and a half years or whatever the judge says of your sentence, either on probation, and you can slowly prove yourself to be a citizen and work your way off. He immediately left the country, right?
No, he didn't leave immediately.
Oh.
No, he didn't. When he got out, he went to live with John Paul Jr.
His son.
in Florida. And John had two houses with his wife, Patricia, who goes by Trish Paul. So he lived in the spare house that they used to rent out. And he placed it down in the paper looking for a mate to sail around the world for him in the personal ads.
Right. And back then they had personal ads in newspaper. And
That
Chalice
was
was already,
1999.
and Chalice went missing in.
She went missing in 1981.
Right,
The
so this
summer
is
of
so this is 7 or 8 years later, and
No, it's longer than that. I mean, he got out in 1999. She
99. I thought it was 89.
She disappeared in 1981.
And one of the reasons that, and what Lisa had done is the police weren't looking for Chalice, because I want to make sure we get this, because Chalice, they didn't believe she was
Now, the problem was, this is the truth, she was never officially investigated by law enforcement. And probably the main reason is because John Paul never reported her missing. He was legally married to her. He never even made a missing person report. Then the family was misled by John, saying that, oh, she left, she went on a party boat. That was one version. Then there was other versions, but it was a criminal sister who's still on the lam. Her name, and I'll mention her name, Catherine Christine Murray is her current name. And she lied to the family and said she was working with the FBI. We found that not to be true. So,
well, so you mean Chalice's sister was a criminal and is on the run also?
yes.
And how long has she been on the run?
We're since 2006.
She's getting 19 years. I don't know how people do that, because you have to.
Don't worry. We know where she's at. The only problem is we can't extradite her on where she's located.
She's not in America then.
She's in America. Yes.
Oh, well, but
Yes.
because I've known a few people on the run, being a drug smuggler and a drug runner myself. I have, and it's not easy. I mean, you can never call your family again. You can never, if the police are truly looking for you. I have a friend of mine that was on the run, and every Christmas they would call his house and ask if he was there by his first name. But he was somebody that went by his middle name his whole life. The whole family called him his middle name. So as soon as the family got the phone call, they knew it was the FBI or the Marshal Service, because they'd asked for him by his first name. But it's a lot of pressure. So she's.
So
Well, can I ask a question?
Can I just finish this thought?
Yeah, please. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
So she lied and said she was working with the FBI. We found it's not true. Then she gave 5 different versions the last time she spotted Chalice.
Okay. Sorry.
It was me who contacted John Paul when he was still a free man working in his shop in Lawrenceville.
The race shop.
Building his race shop. And I said, we met before, John. I only met him once with Chalice when she was alive. And I'm going to say she's dead, because I know she's been dead since summer 1981.
Right.
Okay. But he said he left her in Key West, and he was trying to build an alibi with me. And I said, what do you mean you left her? Yeah, she's talking about some treasure hunters. You know anything about that, Lisa? So bottom line is, when we met at the Palm Beach Yacht Club, we met an expedition crew who were, like Jacques Cousteau.
Right.
They were French, and they were
It
from
is
St.
interesting.
Bart's, and the captain's name was Marcel Bert. could not find him all these years. I don't know if I had the right spelling or, he had a treasure hunter name and a different name. But I have photos, and I actually right now have somebody trying to do, facial recognition to see if we can locate him, because now there's technology, we can get that, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Not to try, but going on the run now, like, it's different because of facial recognition.
Right.
Like you could change your name, you could have a fake passport, you could, even with plastic surgery, facial recognition and AI can figure out who you are. So I thought about this the other day when we were talking, that the people on the run today, in the next couple of years, they may all be found. I mean, it may be really hard to change your look.
Well, it's not only that. Since 9/11, we have Homeland Security. It's very, very difficult to travel with a fake passport, which John had multiple passports, and I've had eyewitnesses see this in a safe, etc. But bottom line is, she never got investigated, and
Your dad's. Yeah.
she never got investigated. And then it was a fluke. I was in New York City. I went to the Hamptons. I had a car. I had girlfriends that were high fashion models. We went to a French photographer's opening of a restaurant that he owned. He was very well known in the city. And the mate was there, and he's French, and his name's Stefan. I go, Stefan, what are you doing? Oh, I knew his name was Michael Reinhardt, was the photographer. So he goes, well, I know Mike, the photographer. I said, well, I thought you were going on the expedition, because the story was these people were going to Caicos to check out wreckage. It was a Spanish ship, so all of the treasures were flocking to Caicos, Turks and Caicos at the time. So I verified it. It was like a gift from God. I said, well, you remember Chalice? We met at Palm Beach Yacht Club. Did she go on the expedition? Because John Paul used that as an alibi. He goes, I left her in Key West. She talked about these treasure hunters. So, she was with him, obviously, and she probably in conversation said, I met these people, whatever. Because they were coming to me, asking me, do you know where I can get any artillery? Because they're afraid of piracy in the international water. I'm in my 20s. I don't know anybody has guns. So, I couldn't help them. So it could have been brought up in a conversation before he got rid of her. And I'm going to say he got rid of her, because that's in my heart and soul. Everything's backed up to the fact that not only did he get rid of her, but most likely Colleen Wood, David Cazorla.
Tell the story, yeah.
Yes. And, Earl Houston Thrower, and a man named Bubba, whose body floated ashore in Spain. Okay. Many, many years of research and investigative work, independent investigative work I have done, that I have found all these people were connected to John Paul. Yeah. We've had other people tell us what their version of how David Cazorla disappeared, okay? And that's coming from a former victim of John Paul's, and that's Stephen Carson. He got shot 5 times by the man.
Well, yeah, John, so just tell you, John Paul was, he was a smuggler. He invited one of his co-conspirators or co-smugglers, I'll say, to meet him at a spot, and then shot him 5 times. And then
that's wrong.
Oh, okay.
That's wrong.
I'm sorry.
Okay. This is the truth. See, I have a memory like an elephant.
She's amazing.
So I remember dates, times, you name it, okay? And Steve and I are friends, so I got it straight from the horse's mouth.
Well, let's say he lived through the
yes, he lived through this, and he's actually doing very well, considering. He has health problems, He lost a kidney.
Well, when you get shot 5 times,
he's had health problems his whole life because of this.
Because of the shoot, right. He lost a kidney because of the shoot. Yeah.
He was in intensive care for 2 months. Okay? They didn't even know he was connected to John Paul until they gave him a piece of paper and they said, who shot you? And he wrote out John Paul.
He couldn't talk?
In the hospital. No, not at all. Wow. And it wasn't until he was getting better they came and they were going to throw, a RICO Act on all this. But he hadn't been working with John Paul. He was the boat captain. He hadn't even been working with him since the 2-3 years prior to the shooting. So what happened is that John Paul, now I've been told this by a family member who would know this firsthand, and also I did my own research that it was actually an order that John Paul got to sew up loose ends because the heat was on. He was under investigation by the feds at the time. Steve Carson knew nothing about it. They didn't even know he was associated with it. So the minute they found out it was him that shot him, he had 24-hour protection.
While he was in the hospital.
While he was in the hospital. And then it wasn't until he got back well enough that the U.S. Marshals came, picked him up, took him in a station wagon to an airport runway. He's not even sure at that point what airport that was. Loaded up on a private plane and flown to
Johannesburg.
Hyannisport,
Yeah, North
Massachusetts.
Oh, right.
Puts him up in a Holiday Inn. His knee's blown out. He can't walk. He has a little stick, and he gave some device to take out staples on his leg. And he was bedridden. He had to order in room service. And U.S. Marshal would come once a week and give him $500. And after a month, he goes, listen, you got to get up. You got to go get a job because I still can't even walk. So he was really only under witness protection for a month.
Well, wait. Their idea of witness protection is to scoop you out of a medical facility where you're getting care, fly you up to Hyannisport,
and
put you in a Holiday Inn, and then tell you to mend yourself. And here's a couple of dollars.
Yes, that's exactly how it went down.
What year was this?
He got shot in 1983. They didn't, so it was shortly after that.
So he was
shot April 19th, 1983.
So let's put it this way. You know how we always say, well, like when we talk about the smuggling dollars, like I had $80,000 laying in a paper bag in my closet, but that was $1980. So today it would be $250,000, after 40 years.
Right.
In 1983, $500 was basically $500. Like you could, you weren't going to get far with $500 taking care of yourself.
So you know what he did?
What?
He called up his parents. He says, and he had law enforcement in his family.
Oh.
So he says, meet me at the airport. Bring the shotgun. I'm coming home. And he came home with the last $500 he got. And it was a friend of his who was a chef who lived in the woods, northern Florida. So he nursed him back to health. He's 6'5". He came back less than 100 pounds. That's how skinny he was.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm serious.
So he was a big man.
He nursed himself back to health. And he laid low because, John Paul's still on the loose. Right. Nobody knows where he's at. They didn't apprehend John Paul until 1986 in Switzerland.
But so let me ask, I want to go back to what I mentioned earlier, just because, now that we're getting rolling here. You've been chasing John Paul for 44 years. Have you ever looked out your window thinking, because there was a long time, nobody's, he's been on the run, that he's going to come after you for putting up the website. Have you ever, in other words, the psyche of a murderer, he's a mass murderer. He's killed multiple people and shot multiple people. We're going to get into his third wife that appears was killed when he took the boat to Spain.
No,
but
they never got married.
They never got married. Well, his third relationship. But have you ever looked out the window and said, is there anybody in the bushes?
Absolutely had zero fear of John Paul.
You were determined to get justice.
Well, not only that, but I've been told by a prominent lawyer who's a good friend of mine in Hawaii, who said, Lisa, remember this. The more high profile you are, the safer you are. And it's the truth. And John knows I didn't actually see him kill Chalice. Of course, he was following my website, my Facebook page, and listening to my podcast and any kind of blog page, racing. He was abreast, I'm sure, of all of that and knew.
Yeah.
But, what? Was I really a liability for him? No.
Well, no, he was on the run.
Just like people ask Steve, aren't you afraid he's going to come back? He goes, why should I be afraid he'd come back after me? He's the one that shot me. I didn't shoot him.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the difference, right?
And then, so the other thing is, you're talking about Steve. Unfortunately, again, I guess he'd done some smuggling with John. But
he was the boat captain, and there was two teams. There was the team. There was a guy by the name of Matt Powers, an older man who has since passed away. I haven't been able to ever interview anybody in his family who was willing to fester up to his involvement in that. But Matt Powers and John Paul were a team. And then it was Steve Carson, boat captain, used to go to, Columbia to pick up the loads with David Casorla. So they had two teams, and they would bring all their loads into Louisiana.
Right.
And there was a bust that took place that actually is the reason why John Paul went on a killing spree. I'm going to say killing spree because there was allegedly a dirty sheriff and a dirty judge and a dirty lawyer who later became a Supreme Court justice
in Louisiana,
who gave the order to clean up the loose ends. So the loose ends were David Casorla, Earl Thrower, who was one of the Lucky Five, a segment on my podcast that everybody should listen to because I got the documentation straight from Louisiana State Police.
It's amazing.
And I know exactly what went down, okay? So there was 5 defendants. There was a boatload coming in. They did it on private property, and the guy had a dock, and the guy with the semi-truck. is the other guy that's missing. Earl Houston Thrower went by the nickname Butch. Okay.
And he wasn't he married to John's first wife after?
Yes.
So,
yes.
so
I'll get into that in a minute. But let me tell you about the bus. Can I just explain
I was going to explain. So just I'm going to preface this.
Okay.
So I've been a drug smuggler. Louisiana was a great place to go. I've actually, at one time as a kid, we had a shrimp boat there that one of the guys I was working for was bringing a load in with another tribe. One of the things about conspiracy laws is you could have done a crime with somebody 10 years earlier, but if they build a conspiracy case, you're as guilty as you are today. And that's one of the tricks the government figured out, at the time. So, he could have still been testified or been convicted in a crime, even though years later. It's happened to many friends of mine. And which Lisa's going to tell you about the story about how they all got busted in Louisiana with the tractor trailer and all that,
right.
And how they all got let go. So go ahead and tell that story. It's complex, but it's a great story,
complex.
Especially if you're into true crime, murder, and smuggling.
I mean, you can't make a script like this. It's impossible. So what happened was the driver, he's a young guy from Tennessee. He's also missing. Oh, Houston, Florida. Butch was his nickname. And he hit the gate. Actually, a neighbor got awakened by the sound of the semi truck. So he called law enforcement. 2 different jurisdictions showed up. We're arguing over who's going to take jurisdiction. That plays into why there was a dirty sheriff involved. You could easily watch this and get rid of it.
And what year was this? 1980.
81.
Yes, it was
January
still a little early.
1981. Chalice was still alive then, okay?
And let me just tell you, as a drug runner, drug smuggler, 81, 70s was when it was really starting. You could get away with, not to use the term murder, but you could get away with a lot and not get charged and do. In the beginning, drug smugglers were considered white-collar criminals. You could be caught with 1,000 pounds and do 0 time or 3 years. But by 1981, it was still the early days, but now you were going to look at 15 years.
Oh, this was, yeah.
You were talking about, was it they thought
20 years.
No, it was 20,000 pounds or something, was it? Tell the story.
I'd have to look at the newspaper.
Well, it was a tractor trailer full.
Right.
It was a huge tractor.
They found the truck. So
yeah,
anyways, the guy hits the fence.
Wakes up the neighbor. Yeah.
Yeah, and so now they're watching the whole thing go down. The owner shows up. They say they're on an oil rig and they're bringing a load in because the load was already taken off the boats. The guy eyewitnessed it, so it's down the road. So now they go and they pull the guy over. That's Earl, and
the police.
He gets permission to open up the back, and it's loaded with marijuana.
And they found marijuana. Just so everybody knows, they found marijuana on the tailgate of the truck. I mean, when you unload big 30,000 pounds of marijuana, it's on the dock, it's on the boat, it's in the boat, it's in the truck. It just falls everywhere. Even if you seal it up and seal it up and seal it up, that's just the nature of the beast. And don't count on the Colombians or the Jamaicans to seal it up. So
funny you bring up a Colombian because there was
well, they had to bring it was Colombian weed. There's no.
They had to bring a Colombian guy, and John was on that. John fled on another boat. They found the boat on down the river. They opened up the bridge. They closed the bridge so nobody could have access. It had something to do with there was a drawbridge. Right. But John was able to escape.
He was there that day.
He was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And the little Colombian left. But the 2 of the other defendants, one's in the semi truck, 2 are in the water trying to flee. Now this is cold; it's January.
And they're swimming.
Louisiana.
I know.
So they have to flee, and one was demanding, "I'm freezing, give me a blanket." So they got the guys and they arrested them, and now they were gonna, had to post bond, right? $1 million bond.
$250 each, right? There was 5 guys. It was $200,000 each.
Yes. So
in cash.
So one of the defendants, I won't mention the name, but he was instructed by John Paul to drive to Florida to Brumo's dealership.
That's a
Porsche dealer. Don't put that on the record.
Okay. That's a big Porsche dealers and racing.
In Jacksonville,
Florida.
Florida.
Cars are famous, yeah.
Right. And it was owned by Peter Gregg. That's
famous
another
driver.
Story.
Famous racer.
Story about Peter. Peter allegedly committed suicide. Beg to differ on that. So does his side.
He was found on the beach with a bullet in his temple.
A perfect bullet, like this.
Yeah,
how does a man shoot himself perfectly?
That's not the way it's done.
Here,
it's usually done like this.
Here or under here. Okay. Beg to differ. Not only that, they found a note that had date and time stamp that's in the newspaper archives, showing a suicide note with the time after a hiker found him on the beach. Okay, what does that mean? Somebody else planted the letter in there, assuming he wasn't going to be found right away.
That's crazy.
Is that insane? Okay, so how come St. John's County Sheriff's Department didn't investigate this a little further? You just married 3 days prior, so you would immediately think maybe it's the wife, right? She wants the money. No, she was cleared. Okay, so I'm still in question on Peter Gregg's.
Let me just say something. Usually, usually when a husband dies, you look at the wife, and the wife dies, you look at the husband. But 98% of the time, when the wife's dead, they look at the husband. They don't always look at the wife. I mean, most women aren't killers, and being but tell the story more about the drug bust and all that. Yeah.
I have a suspicion. This is my suspicion. Okay, that this one of the defendants came to Brumo's, was ordered to pick up a brand new Mercedes, drive it to New Orleans, check into a motel, and John Paul Jr. met him and gave him $1 million cash for the bond, and gave it to this lawyer who eventually became a Supreme Court justice. So who got the car, we don't know. But the money, the guys were set free. Time served. Charges gone.
Yeah, Louisiana.
Five gone. Lucky 5.
I grew up in New Orleans, and I'll tell you a funny story.
A lot of corruption, right?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So I got my first ticket running a stop sign. My first driving, I was 15. So it was 1972, I think 71. And a friend of the family said, go down to the head of the traffic department and meet this man. So I walk in the door. Now, this doesn't happen. And this head of the New Orleans traffic department, older gentleman, he says, boy, you got a ticket here running a stop sign? I said, yes, sir. He goes, sit down. And he gives me about 5 minutes worth of talk. He goes, you ain't going to do that anymore, are you? I said, no, sir. He goes, you're going to learn how to drive a little better now? Yes, sir. He goes, okay, then. Thanks for coming. Ripped up the traffic ticket and threw it away. That's Louisiana justice. It's not much different today. Now, that was the early 70s, but that's how I forgot about that. I forgot all about that, but that's how my first traffic ticket got resolved.
Well, I found out that the lawyer, I'm going to call him dirty lawyer, okay?
Well, aren't they all coming to go ahead.
His brother was, a state representative. So, they had it sewn up politically.
Yeah.
And then there was so much drug smuggling going on and so much money being passed. Yeah. We all know the Miami skyline was built on drug money.
I say it all the time.
That's a fact.
I say it all.
They made a lot of
the police departments.
Banks very wealthy.
Oh yeah, they used to have banks down in Miami that were all they would funnel the money and wash the money and I mean even when we used to smuggle money to the Caymans or go to Bahamas, it was the Royal Bank of Canada. We would deposit the money and everybody had their fingers in the pie. When I always say the same thing. Fort Lauderdale and Miami was built on the drug money. This would have been a lot sleepier little cow town if it wasn't for what that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the story about the drug smuggling in Louisiana, later in the years you couldn't walk in with $1 million. You have to show where the money came from. Not them. No. You bring the cash. We don't care where the money. We know where the money came from.
Care of.
It came from the last load.
Well, this happened before when John Paul Jr. got busted with Christopher Schill.
I didn't know this.
Christopher Schill was one of the lucky 5, okay? He's a man that refuses to talk, but he got busted with John Paul Jr. prior to that. John Paul Jr., they didn't find the load. They only found residue, like you were talking about. But they found a boat that John Paul Sr. had under the name John Drew. He likes to keep the first name, John, and then he changes the last name.
I saw that.
Aliases. And so they found the boat called the Lady Royale, which was like a sport fisherman.
Right.
But they didn't find the product. Product was already offloaded. Right. But, John Paul Jr. had fake passport, fake ID. They did a little payoff, and next thing you know, they walked.
Really?
That was in Louisiana, yes.
Oh, and that happened before the Lucky 5?
Yes.
Oh, so they knew Louisiana was a good place to work.
Yes.
You get caught, you buy your way out.
Exactly.
It's like a third world country. We used to actually say New Orleans was like a third world country. It was like no other place in America. Right. We used to say that when we lived there.
I have another important part I need to add to this because
you're on a roll,
the gentleman who got the Mercedes, okay, so he's an eyewitness. There was a gentleman who was running Brumo's who gave him the car, famous racer, Hurley Haywood.
Yeah. Hurley
and I spoke in 2009 when I found out about Colleen Wood gone missing. I was extremely nervous. I said, I just want to talk to your sister. She was married to John Paul. I found out through archive records and timeline that actually John Paul was still married to Chalice when he married Hope Haywood Paul.
So Hurley Haywood's a well-known, world-round, respected race car driver. He's won like the Daytona 24 Hours multiple times. I mean, he was a famous Porsche factory driver. So for him to be
partnered up with Peter Gregg for the Team Brumos Racing,
which is a famous racing team, but to bring Hurley Haywood's name into this, he is such an icon in racing. So we, sister, have at it, like I said.
Okay, well, Hurley needs to.
It is what it is.
Hurley needs to be interviewed because he clearly, the Haywoods knew what happened at Chalice, and I'll tell you why. This is a fact. When I spoke to Hurley, and I said, well, I found out about Collingwood, I want to speak to Hope. Well, Hope's remarried. She's living in, Toronto. She's out of the country. She lives in Canada. She want nothing to do with John Paul. She had a kid with him. Okay. She actually got busted with him when they went to arrest John Paul going up the steps to a Geneva bank. And she brought their child, Adrian Paul, AJ, who was, I'm sure they had a tail on her. They found her, okay?
Right, but what was really quick? So John Paul was on the run. He went to Switzerland. This is his third.
This is his, third wife.
She had went to Switzerland. So obviously they were talking. I mean, she didn't just go to Switzerland on vacation and run into her husband. No, she went there. No. He was communicating with her. So she was knowingly, and she did 18 months in jail or something, didn't she?
Well, that was all under wraps. Nobody ever want to say. I found it on a newspaper article, and I guess it got in circulation that, yes, she was involved. But let me get back to the point that I found out by way of Hurley. Hope suggests you call our stepfather, who was a prominent, well-known attorney from Chicago, used to, represent a big ball team. I can't remember. I think it was football or whatever. And they lived outside Palm Springs, California. So when I called Don Rubin, who's now says deceased, first thing he says, are you law enforcement or a private investigator? I said, no. I was a friend of Chalice, Alfred Paul. I'm trying to locate her family and get information on Collingwood because I just got on the internet at 2009 and found out a girlfriend went missing. I thought he was in prison the rest of his life. I had no idea he got out and came to my neck of the woods in Wellington. I live not far from there and lived with John Paul Jr. And then another woman goes missing. So I immediately contacted law enforcement in Fort Lauderdale Police Department. They had a homicide detective who was handling the case. His name was Detective Mark Shotwell. I proceeded to bomb him with tons of information, and he even got aggravated and said, it's out of my jurisdiction. But I was just so excited the fact that I had law enforcement who was going to maybe follow through and connect the dots with Chalice's disappearance, okay? But, Don Rubin said something very prominent to me. And
the lawyer,
Yes, he said, well, I had to check out my son-in-law to find out if he was a bigamist. Because, and I found this out through archive records in Georgia, because he was still legally married to Chalice when he married Hope in the living room in Seattle, Washington, of another famous racer, Bruce Levitt, who made his money with garbage. I don't know if you knew that. Okay. No. So they had a race. They had, garbage trucks. So they had a race in Portland. So,
Portland Grand Prix.
Hope was knocked up. She was pregnant. So he married her, even though he was still married to Chalice legally. And he never made a missing person report. So what does that tell you? And, of course, Hurley was there. John Paul Jr. was there. John Paul Jr.'s wife, Patricia Paul, was there. And they got married there. So, this was, and he says, I found out that, John Rubin says, I found out after he married, my stepdaughter, because that's his stepdaughter, that he went to Haiti to get a divorce. Because in Haiti, you don't need to have your spouse present. And after all, she was already shark bait. So I've got a lawyer telling me this in 2009.
Oh, he said that?
Yes.
He said she was shark bait?
Yes.
Holy shit.
She was shark bait. So don't tell me that the Haywoods didn't know anything about what happened to Chalice. Okay, the Pauls knew. I know this firsthand because Trish Paul and I became friends. I even took her to Europe. I took her to Italy. It's a long story.
Yeah.
My husband is originally from Italy. And, she spilled the beans on a lot of stuff.
A
Okay.
couple of glasses of wine later.
Well, she has one kidney. She has wine and
Right to her head.
okay.
Um,
But so, anyways,
don't forget
this
to
was
tell
this
about.
was something that was a shock to me, and through many background reports, and I found one error on an address in Jonesboro, Georgia. It was a typo written wrong on one background check. I finally found that current owner, and that's where Chalice was living with her first husband before she divorced and married John Paul. And he says, "Well, I know he moved to Walaka, Florida, which was a little, hokey town
Yeah.
in North Florida." And so I cleverly contacted neighbors, and I have, tricks of how I can find people. And they said, "Well, he went to the hospital." So it's this little town.
Who's he? Who?
That's Donald Barnett. Donald
And that
J.
was
Barnett.
and
That
that-
was Chalice's first husband.
Gotcha.
Who introduced her to John Paul
And
at
she
Road
let-
Atlanta
and
when
she-
he was doing practice laps for his Porsche, and he saw Chalice, tall, brunette, blue-eyed, beautiful girl.
Long legs.
Says, "Let me take you in the car and I'll take you for a spin." And after that, she was, smitten for him. And he found out she was a flight attendant. There's reasons why he attached himself to Chalice, being a flight attendant, okay? Nobody searched stewardesses back then.
Right.
Okay.
So you can carry anything on a plane.
Money offshore,
Yeah.
your little stash of whatever it is you're liking. We know he liked other drugs. Okay, he wasn't just a marijuana smoker.
Well, he might have been a marijuana smuggler, but a cocaine user, let's say,
he
or
was a
something else.
cocaine user,
And
definitely.
whatever you do, let's not forget to go into the second wife, third wife he killed, or girlfriend.
Girlfriend.
Yeah,
Well, that's
right. Yeah, you
So
broached
that's
on
why I reached out to Hurley, which escalated into Don Rubin,
Sure.
and then I was on a mission. I went full throttle, to put it bluntly. Okay, from 2009 on, doing so much research and investigative work that I've uncovered a tremendous amount of evidence and timeline that actually shows to this day that these people were never interviewed that should have been, because if they had been, or if anybody came forward, whether it be the Alfords, Chalice's family, it's dysfunctional, okay, the Pauls, the Haywoods, okay, other people would still be alive. So she disappears summer 81. They get busted. They get these guys out. Now, another thing I didn't mention, one of the Lucky Five, he thought he was a marked man to be shot the same night Stephen Carson was shot.
Right.
Because he was an eyewitness to this transaction,
So,
right?
what do you
To
think?
the money in the car. So, usually that happens. If you have somebody who helps get rid of a body, usually the person that got rid of it, then they disappear.
Right,
Right.
but so let me ask you. So I want to ask you about that. So, they got the money, and he was part of that thing. Who's the one you think that's told John Paul? Because John Paul was the boss. So somebody, he was the big guy. So who was somebody telling him to clean up this mess? You're saying it was the lawyers and the politicians in Louisiana that are saying to
I
John
think
Paul.
it was a sheriff, and a judge. And this lawyer escalated his career after that, of course.
But what I'm saying is John Paul was the kingpin. He was in charge of everything.
Right.
So you're saying somebody said to him, listen, they can't give him an order, but they can tell him, listen, buddy, you want this case to stay dead? You want this, then we need you to kill these people because we don't
Well,
want
they're
any
not going to
reference.
tell him. They're not going to say, go kill him. They're going to say,
No.
just sew up some loose ends, okay?
Right,
So,
right,
I mean,
Right. If I were you,
John
say,
Paul is
it would go like this.
It's a narcissistic sociopath and I
Yeah.
believe psychotic, so he has no problem getting rid of
Yeah,
somebody.
somebody
If it's going to be a liability for his future
Absolutely. Whether-
and his money. I mean, obviously, you got rid of Chalice. Chalice knew too much. She knew too much. But she filed for divorce 10 days later, lifted the divorce, and filed for alimony.
So she
okay.
was after his money.
What?
A little bit. Alimony.
Well, you want me to stay quiet,
Paid me off.
and it didn't happen.
So
it
he
was
killed
easier
her.
to get rid of her,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And don't forget to tell us about the second girl he killed.
Okay.
We get there.
Well, there was another love interest involved with John during after she got married on Lime Rock Park, the infield, on May 26, 1980. They sailed to Le Mans, and they were on the Queen Elizabeth II. Little did Chalice know there was another woman who was a love interest of John's on the ship.
So John brought on his honeymoon on the Queen Elizabeth, fancy spending all the money living it up. He had another girl in another stateroom.
Yes. And Chalice told me this herself, alive. Okay, so I know it's a bona fide fact and truth, because when they got there, they checked into a hotel. But I guess in Europe, a lot of parents go out and they want to leave their kid in the room, so they have the lock on the outside. So he locked her in her own stateroom, and she went down the trellis to get down to the first floor.
Hey, hell hath no wrath with a woman
and
that's
bust
pissed
John
off.
with this other woman
On his honeymoon.
on his honeymoon.
That's crazy.
I mean,
That's
if
crazy.
it was me, I'd say, let's get an almanac, call it quits. I'm out of here. She would be alive today.
But he's a con
he's
artist.
a famous race car driver.
Yeah.
She came from a small town in North
Exactly.
Florida. It was exciting. She was going to racetracks or eating at the best restaurants, staying in the beautiful hotels. He was charming. I didn't think he was charming when I met him, but anyways.
Well, he wasn't a really. I mean, I remember I was
a little guy. He was short.
All right, listen, short. I can relate to short. That's what I was going to say. I hate to say it because us race car drivers aren't usually very tall. Although John Paul Jr. was tall.
Yes.
But Mario Andretti and I sit nose to nose. I stood next to him a few times, and we ain't tall because we fit in the car better. The lighter you are.
As far as Randy. Randy's a little.
No, Randy Lanier and I are best friends. Good friends. We're the same height.
Yeah.
Right. You rub it in. But John Paul, I was at the track. John Paul Sr. was not tall. He was like my height.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
exactly.
And he wasn't a great looking guy. Where John Paul Jr. was a good looking kid.
He got his mother's genes.
Obviously, because he was
they have
a
American
tall.
Indian.
Oh, is that it?
Yes.
Yeah, my first wife was.
That's
American.
why he came out so dark and handsome.
And John Paul was a good looking guy. I mean, he could have been a model. He was tall, fit, good looking.
Strangely enough, his son became a model.
So I see how.
Model in New York for a while, but so anyway.
So John Paul Sr. was charming and used his money. And hey, listen, that short guy's got to be charming. What can I say? Anyway, carry on.
So now we found out. We'll recap. Okay, we found out about Chalice's disappearance. Okay, the alibi. We found out that he got orders to clean up the loose ends. Okay.
Out of
Now it gets even more interesting. This is on my podcast. Michael Paul, the son, it's been on there 3 times. And he just let it out. Okay. He told it like it was. Now, the sale, John convinced him to meet him in Hatteras to drive his boat down to Jacksonville. This is before he shot Stephen Carson. It was premeditated, absolutely premeditated, because he asked his son to do the dirty deed and kill Steve Carson.
Oh, you're kidding.
On the boat. There was another gentleman there. I won't disclose his name. He's somebody that really needs to be interviewed, because he could have been the person who convinced John that Steve Carson was a liability. Okay. And he's still alive and well and lives in the area.
Let's just put this out here today. There's only a couple crimes that have no statute of limitation. And
murder is
the number one.
Yes.
You cannot murder somebody. You can go 50 years. And in my book, I tell the story of how we put a contract on someone that was armed robbing all of us and putting guns to us and trying to kill one of my friends. And it's the one crime that I'm glad that I didn't want to ever take anybody's life. They were trying to kill us, but thank God I never did that, because that was a crime that would follow me for life.
Forever.
Right,
yes.
Forever.
Totally.
Even though they were scumbags and they were murderers, it's actually tied to, I don't know if you ever heard of Stanley Cowan murder, Joyce Cowan. It's a famous murder of mine. They've written books and done documentaries. They were the guys that killed them. But anyway, back to your story, because my story is in the book.
They sailed to St. Augustine. Michael Paul went on his way. And
that's the youngest son. And
there's no mention of him in, racing blog pages.
Yeah.
He was the fueler for the JLP cars. Yes. He was working behind the scenes for the family.
Right.
But on the racetrack and involved, okay? But so he gets to St. Augustine, and a friend, another person who's now since dead, who I think tipped off John Paul that he was going out floundering that night. Now, the man that was in the boat, I believe, is the same man that basically put the thought in John Paul's head that Steve could be a liability. Now, face it, he hadn't been working with him for 3 years. He was a boat captain,
Right.
right?
So he really wasn't.
He didn't even like John Paul. He met him once. He didn't like him.
Right. So
he cut ties with all of that. He went on the run because what he did was when they came to him and wanted him to. This is before he got shot. Okay. Steve Carson was connected because they found evidence in New Orleans that connected him to the boat. Some things were purchased. Of course, nowadays he probably could have just said, F you and left, and he never would have gotten indicted. But he did get indicted.
He was indicted in the New Orleans. So Steve Carlson.
Prior to that, right.
Steve Carlson, who John Paul Sr. shot 5 times while he was on the dock getting ready to go flounder fishing at night, because you do it at night, as you said. So he might have been tied to the bust in New Orleans.
Not the one, the Lucky Five, the one before.
Oh, right, the one that John Paul Jr.
Yes.
This is a sordid web.
I know. So David Consorla was the guy he was working with, who's also missing. So when he was put in front of a grand jury, he said something very prominent, Steve did, that the judge said. He says, listen, your freedom is in your mouth. And until you want to talk, I'm putting you in jail for
contempt of court or something.
So
Steve Carlson was in jail.
This was in New Orleans.
Right.
So he served 14 months in a New Orleans holding cell, detention center, okay, and outlived the life of that grand jury. He got out. His lawyer got him out. He goes back to St. Augustine.
Right.
Some buddy of his tells John Paul and this other guy who was in the boat that I was talking about when they sailed from Hatteras. I'm assuming he was the one, right, who put the heat on Steve, found him out floundering, came in 2:00 in the morning. He was with another man, too.
Really?
He had a friend on the boat.
Oh, I didn't know that.
John Paul had a .38, which I used to own one, and, you have 6 shots, right? So he, coming up the dock, now he's already gone through, talking to feds and all. So John was looking like a federal agent, and his eyes seen him from a distance with a sedan that looked like, a cop car.
He kind of dressed up like a cop.
And he had his clean shaven, and he always had a beard, so he clean shaven, a suit jacket.
Well, let me just tell you, the people that home invaded me, that we had to put the contract on, that's how they did it. They dressed up like cops, knocked on the door, and said they were police.
Right.
And all you had to do was have a shiny pair of shoes, a cheap suit,
right?
And that's exactly what they did. I looked out the window, and they pulled the gun on me, but they looked like cops. They had a cheap suit, shiny shoes.
That's it.
Yep.
So he got up closer and he realized it was John Paul. He says, he opened up the trunk of the car. He says, get in. He goes, he knew he'd be a dead man to get in. He goes, I'm not getting in. He took off running. Yeah. And that's when he shot him in the back. He shot him, blew out his knee. When he blew out his knee is when he fell. And then the guy on the dock he was fishing with yelled, hey. So the last shot, boom, he missed him. He had no more rounds.
Oh, so he fired 5 shots into
Steve,
and then
the one at the guy at the end.
As he was running away, he goes, oh, there's another witness. Let me fire.
Now, Steve says he swears there was another person in the car.
All right.
Okay. The press never picked up on that, by the way. So he gets lucky, and he gets his friend runs because he didn't live too far away, so they didn't have cellular then. So they call 911. They come. They put him in a hospital where they had trauma surgeon there.
Yeah.
They just happened to have a trauma surgeon that night. Right. Saved his life. He died twice. He came back that night.
He's alive today.
He's alive today.
How old is he?
He's in his
80s, 70s,
late 70s. He's doing very well. He does.
Hey,
financially and personally, I mean, he lost his wife. He eventually married. He lost his wife during all this commotion when he got shot. Yes, guy gave him a divorce.
I can understand
he lost everything.
I can understand.
And then he remarried, and his second wife died of illness. So he's a character. He's a type A person. I love Steve. He's a wonderful guy. I've met him in person. But
good for him. Resilient.
Yeah, I mean, this story has more twists and turns than a racetrack. That's all I can say.
Funny you should use that analogy.
It really does.
Having been a road racer, I know how many twists and turns a racetrack can have. I think.
But you want to talk about Colleen Wood?
You got to tell Colleen Wood because it really ties in what kind of socio-psychopath John Paul is or was.
So. John Paul, after he shot Stephen Carson, he fled. He went to Switzerland. He got extradited back. He was tried, found guilty, facing 25 years. And he ended up in Leavenworth. In fact, Randy, serve time in Leavenworth, they used to walk the field.
Well, Randy
together.
tells Randy Lanier, who's a friend of ours and famous race car driver, famous drug smuggler, tells the story the first time he meets John Paul. They almost get in a fist fight at the pits because John Paul's such an asshole and Randy is not. He's one of the most mellow, caring person you'll ever meet. And they go into Preston Henn's. He goes into Preston Henn's
Yeah.
trailer. Yeah.
He helped all the inmates who got out and got him a job at the flea market.
Yeah, Randy worked
and
at
Randy
the flea market.
he did that with John when he got out.
Oh, really?
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Preston Henn let Randy work, and they had a car. He had his Maserati birdcage and displayed at in Fort Lauderdale. They have a place that was a drive-in that Preston Henn turned into. They call the Swap Shop Flea Market, and Preston has since passed. But a big racing fan. AJ Foyt raced some of Preston Henn's cars. John Paul, Randy Lanier, and he was just a cowboy. I mean, Preston Henn was just a wild cowboy that made millions of dollars in a drive-in. It's not to change the subject, but that land today, because it's huge, it's on both sides of a major highway, it's got to be worth for how many millions and millions of dollars? Just the land.
Yes.
They made a lot of money. During the night, you go there as a drive-in, and during the day, it was a swap shop, like a flea market. Now it's no longer a drive-in because people don't go to drive-ins. But anyway, tell us some more about that.
Okay, so he gets out. Now, another fact.
You got a lot of
from
them.
him.
You really know this stuff.
Got it from his son. Okay, because Mike and John Paul Jr. went to go visit him in Leavenworth. There was a race going nearby.
Yeah.
And actually, John got upset because I think Junior fell asleep
at the visit.
Yeah, but anyways, because I am assuming he was tired. He's a race car driver, right?
Probably race long. When you do a long, they were endurance racers,
right?
So they would race 6-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour races,
right? And
so you drive 2 or 3 drivers will run 3 hours at a time, but you rarely sleep. I mean, you go back to the camper and you try to sleep, but it's hard to sleep when the noise. You will, but it's not going to be like you're sleeping at your house, not worried about your teammates or the car or. You might be pulled out of your sleep to get in a car if another driver is slowing down or not, if there's a problem with the car. So, yeah, it's tough.
So, but I heard that John was actually doing the books for the warden.
John Sr.
John Sr.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was
That's
a
kind
favor
of like,
or what. Why he only served half the sentence or on good behavior or a combination of the two?
Yeah, not to interrupt, but that's the story in Shawshank Redemption. Remember the William Dufresne was doing the books for the warden, figured out the warden was skimming money, and then
he was a math whiz and he did his tax returns, I guess, whatever. I don't know. But anyways, he got out. He came to South Florida and went to Wellington to live with John Paul Jr. And then he placed an ad in a personal ad looking for a mate to sail around the world. Colleen Wood, who's from Ohio, moved here to South Florida and lived the dream, wanted a place on the water, got a job at Lighthouse Point Marina.
I know that marina well.
Bought a little condo, catty corner on the Intercoastal from the Boca Resorts Hotel. And, she's living her life. She answers the ad. She meets him. He introduces himself as Hans. That's just a nickname. That is not his legal name. He came to this country as Johann Leendert Paul. And I had to go through very deep dive into archive records. His father was the opposite. Leendert, his first name was Leendert. Johann Paul. So that's why his father Americanized the name, and he was Lee Paul, and John was John Lee Paul. You understand? They had the first and middle name, but it was reversed.
Right.
So they Americanized themselves, and that's when they moved to Muncie, Indiana.
That's normal. My father came. Don't forget what used to happen. My father came here in 1939. On the run from the Nazis, and as soon as you go into Ellis Island, they go, "What's your name?" And he goes, "Ludwig Bär," and he goes, "Okay, Louis." They just change it.
Well, I heard a lot of guys were named Tony because they had written on there to New York, TONNY.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a joke or is that true?
I don't know.
Everybody was a Tony.
But I've heard that. I don't heard that, but yeah, they just simplified their name. If your name was, Luigi, Angelo, when they go, okay, again.
Yeah, they shortened it.
Yeah, my father was turned from Ludwig to Lou, and then and when we moved to New Orleans, we were there when we were living in New Orleans. He finally went in and changed it, not back to Ludwig, but I think he changed the spelling to match was more like, I don't remember, but he passed away shortly after that. But yeah, everybody got renamed.
They simplified.
Yeah,
the
like
names,
you're sitting there taking names, and you're going, huh? What's your name? Here, this is your new name. That's what they did. So, or they did it on purpose, hard to say.
Right. Well, so Colleen now falls smitten. He loaded up her entire apartment with red roses.
Jeez.
That's kind of psychotic, right? I mean, it's nice to get a bouquet, but
Yeah.
you're going to load up the whole apartment with red roses.
No, when you're trying to buy yourself a girl.
Over, okay.
Yeah.
Well, he convinced her to, sell the condo. She had flown with him, found out from one of the family members of the Wood family that he actually took her to Germany. Press didn't pick up on this. Went to Germany. How did he get to Germany? He's on parole.
Right? Oh, you're kidding. So while he's out
well, he's with this girl, this new girlfriend. Right. Just got out. She doesn't know anything about his criminal past, that he just got out and he's on parole. And now he flies to Germany.
What year was this again?
1999.
And so she sold her condos
between 99. Well, he got out in August of 1999, and she disappeared December 2000. So you see, most likely the end of 99, sometime 2000.
And he had convinced her to sell her condo, all her worldly belongings.
Well, before that was towards the end.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right.
So
So what do you think the condo?
Why did they go to Germany? I'll tell you why. Because Colleen's one of her sons was on a military base, and he refused to go on. He says, "Well, we can go have dinner. We'll meet off base." Because most likely, I think Colleen knew a little more than the press has ever disclosed about him, because he had to have flown in on a fake passport, right? Well, I mean, if you're traveling with somebody, you're going through,
well, he could have done. He could have said to her, "Oh, I got to go to the bathroom. Go ahead. I'll meet you." Or it's good. I left something on the plane. He separate. He could have said, "Listen."
But you would think you're traveling. You're going to see his documentation, right?
Listen, if you're a slick, smuggler, maybe he had two passports. One that was him. One that was the one he was going.
Well, he had dual passports.
Yeah. He had dual citizenship.
He had Holland.
Right.
Citizenship and American.
Right.
So maybe he used his Dutch.
Oh.
His Dutch passport.
Yeah, he used this Dutch passport, and because it had a different name, they weren't looking for it.
Right.
Yeah, and there's two different lines. Likely. There's lines that.
Well, this is all evidence. I'm sure that Fort Lauderdale PD still has an archived records. Okay,
somewhere buried in the tombs.
Her case is a cold case, 24-year cold case. Okay, and Chalice is 44, and was never investigated. So he went. He took her to Europe. He took her. I believe, to a racetrack, so she had to have known something about his racing background. Okay, when he got out of prison, he took John Paul Jr. and was seen, and it's another segment on my podcast by Michael DePontis, a former racer who since passed away. We became friends. I found him through my investigative work, and we became best friends. He lived locally, but he was at Road Atlanta and saw Junior and said, "Hey, how you doing?" Remember from the 80s from racing together. And he goes, "How's your dad?" He goes, "Well, he got out of jail and actually he's going to be here." Well, they came together in a Porsche, a $150,000 Porsche, eyewitnessed by Mike DeFontis. So I'm sure that was in storage and kept away from the feds to not get them on some other probably expensive vehicles. They were confiscating everything. It was in terms of his bond.
Yeah, well, that's
he
the
was
way.
Going to he had to forfeit all of his assets and a $500,000 bond at St. John. Who would let a guy out on bond who shot a man 5 times? I mean, we knew he wasn't going to come back for the hearing, and of course he didn't. He fled. He went to Switzerland.
How did they let him do that?
Because he gave him plenty of money.
Well,
and he says, "Okay, here's the deed to this house." But what the public doesn't know.
Right. So he had a bail bond.
The public doesn't know.
The property.
Right after he shot Stephen Carson, now, he went and had a house in Merritt Island and conveniently had Joyce, his first wife, that was her middle name. She went by Joyce, who was married to the other missing man, Earl Thrower. So her legal name, for all intent and purposes, and it shows on the documents as Glenda Joyce Thrower, okay? But he got his dirty lawyer from Atlanta to come to Florida, who's not licensed in the state of Florida, to transfer the deed back to his first wife before he turned himself in, because when he shot Stephen Carson, the feds, everybody was looking for him. They suspected he was at his underground, cave that he built.
So let me tell you
outside Atlanta.
They did is they got caught. They built an underground grow house to grow indoor marijuana, and they built like a huge underground cavern. They dug out. I don't know how they did this.
They used semi-truck trailers underground.
It was that big, and they had this grow house, and of course they caught them there. They caught them there.
A generator.
Yeah, they was unbelievable. I mean, before today, marijuana is grown indoor, and everybody knows that. It's a common thing in California and Oregon and here in Florida, legally and illegally. But he had it done. He was doing it before anybody thought of that.
Exactly. On a farm.
Yeah.
An old man swears he doesn't know anything. Okay.
Yeah, and they covered over it. I mean,
they didn't find him there. They found empty cans where they knew that he was hiding out there.
Oh, really?
What he did was he went and fixed up all of his assets that were left because he knew he'd have to turn himself in. So he transferred this house in Merritt Island into his first wife's. That was a storage center for marijuana, because Junior talks in racing blog pages and interviews that he went out to get his dog food in the garage and saw marijuana from the floor all the way to the top.
That's what we used to do. We had to store it somewhere.
Yeah, they used the Merritt Island house for a storage.
You had to have
Well, he was right on the water. It was easy access. He had water across the street, water behind him, so
probably
you could come in by boat and do the offload.
Right, and so.
So then he wasn't caught. He fled.
But tell go back about what happened to
Colleen.
Yeah.
Okay. So Colleen.
Sorry guys, but we're just excited because this story.
Yeah, we're jumping around. You gotta
hang on with us.
Yeah, because it's all up here. I'm not reading a piece of paper here. Okay.
Yeah.
But so she answers. This ad meets him, and they travel, and now he convinces her to sell the condo, dump the money in the boat, etc. Well, what she had done was she wrote down all her passwords on her laptop. And I'm sure credit cards, whatever, gave it to her son. The reason why I say that, there's a scene in the reenactment that was on ID Network, disappeared. They had a segment called Disappeared, and it was called The Dark Voyage, the Colleen Wood Story, and they did reenactment scenes.
Really?
And you can still see it on YouTube. Yeah, I think you have to pay $1 to watch it. But anyways, what happened was when John Paul had fled, okay, when he got interviewed, this is after, Colleen went missing, okay, because she was down in Key West, same as what Chalice told me. I never even told you about the conversation. Maybe I did already, and it's recorded, about John telling me he left her in Key West in the treasure.
Right, in the treasure. Yeah.
So now, the woman whose family owns the marina she was working at, she had quit because she was getting ready to travel with them, but they made a quick trip to Key West, and Marine Canada, who was in the interview, for this Dark Voyage documentary style reenactment that they did. And she says, "Are you coming to the Christmas party?" Because they became friends, right? She goes, yeah, I'm coming, but I'm down in Key West partying with Hans. Okay. So I say a lot of killers use the same MO. Hey, if it worked with the first body, let's get rid of the next one. Maybe not the same latitude, longitude, but it worked, okay? For Chalice, we'll take her down there, whatever. Okay, there's more than one motive why he got rid of Colleen, okay?
Well, they stole her money.
He stole her money, but he had money offshore. See, another thing.
Yeah, but
he and John Paul had their own little corporation to wire $5,000 a month over from the Bahamas. Now, if you red flag after 5,000, their IRS comes in, right? When you do a wire, so usually you do it 4,999.
10,000. Well, it's hard to say what they were looking for.
Okay, so
they were doing it.
Listen, the detective told me this. He knew he was filtering 5,000 a month.
Right. What they call that is smurfing, and what that is instead of selling one lump sum, you send small sums.
Right.
And
so it's not a red
Smurf.
flag.
Remember the little Smurf cartoon characters? That's called smurfing.
So that's still in, Florida corporation documents. Okay, anybody can go on there and look, sunbiz.org. And so allegedly they were buying cars to sell them at the auction block. We have a big auction center.
I'm
here
in. I
Palm
go to the
Beach,
auction
right?
all the time. I go to
Okay.
the auction all
So
the
he
time.
had a
I've been there
particular.
dozens, once a week for years.
He had a particular Mercedes he wanted, special Mercedes. Okay, so he was going to the auction all the time, and they formed this corporation so they could filter money in. Da da da. So what he did was he got access after she disappeared because she never made it to the Christmas party.
Right, because he took her sailing and dumped her body.
I think offshore off the Florida Keys, like
But
Chalice.
did he come back from the sailing trip, or he left?
Yes,
I thought
yes.
he went to Europe.
And, no, he was back. He had an apartment off Las Olas.
John Senior did.
Yeah, Hendricks
Wait.
Isles.
I know Hendricks
he had an
Isles.
apartment.
Yeah.
He had an apartment
I know
there,
the apartment.
and he had his boat docked there. But then, by the time the detectives had the son of Colleen Wood come down because he got nervous, he hadn't heard from his mother. He thought she was off sailing. A good friend of Colleen's, he's on my podcast, Paul Colley. He knew. He was a former love interest of Colleen's in Ohio, and they used to sail together, and he's an avid sailor. So he played a big part in this because he put up a reward money after she went missing,
nice.
okay?
Nice.
So he's a nice guy. So anyways, he started doing his own research and found out, and the son, they realized that this guy, served time for shooting a man. So that's when, Mike, the son, came down and spoke to law enforcement, and they opened up an investigation. At that point, it was around the summer of 2001, and his boat was in dry dock in Island Murado. So 2 detectives came down, one of them, Mark Shotwell, who's now retired, and he gave different versions, and he showed signs of nervousness.
John Paul did.
Yeah, how she disappeared.
So,
she ran off with a football player friend. All this BS. Next thing you know, he lowers the boat in the water and takes off.
Okay, so I was going to ask you. So I know that that's what. Okay, so he headed to Europe.
No, he headed to the Caribbean.
Okay.
He had money offshore, so he had money. We know for a fact he had money in the Bahamas, probably Grand Cayman,
Yeah, the Caymans.
Jamaica. Then he sailed to the South Pacific. I believe he had either a family member or some sort of connection in New Zealand, Australia, and then he ended up in the Fiji Islands. By the time he got to the Fiji Islands was when a young couple was sailing, and they had seen the TV show, network television, called Unsolved Mysteries. And they recognized the name of the boat, so they notified the girl, another woman he was traveling with. And so she then contacted Fort Lauderdale PD. And that's where the reenactment scene shows a girl running off the boat with a laptop.
So
now she flees. He knows the heat's on. So he takes off and he sails to Europe.
So, but here's the thing. He's sailing. How big is the boat? Because he's sailing a boat. I mean, it's obviously done, for hundreds of years, but it's really hard to sail a boat by yourself all around the world.
Oh, he did it twice. He soloed the Atlantic twice, and he even fell off the boat. Chalice told me that. She said he amazingly was able to pull himself up on the boat. He would solo the Atlantic more than once by himself.
That's crazy.
By himself.
That's what solo is. But how big a boat was it? 50 foot, 100 foot?
Yeah, I think it was maybe 50, 60 foot.
It's a big sailboat. One of the things about sailboats versus powerboats is because they have such a deep keel, they can handle big oceans. And if it does roll over, I've actually been on a sailboat where we thought it was going to flip. You tighten the hatches. They say batten the hatches. So if the ship rolls over, there's an air pocket you can live in. But he was a seasoned seaman.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
These are not things, I know guys that have sailed to Colombia, obviously, Jamaica, and other places. You have to navigate. And they had great navigation by the time he was doing that. But still, that's a major task for one person to do, to circumnavigate, like across the Atlantic. Well, he went to Thailand.
I think there's probably more victims out in the middle of the ocean, to tell you the truth, because he grabs a woman who has dysfunctional family, throwaway. I call them throwaway.
Kind of like there's a guy. What's the guy's name? Epstein. Yeah, that's similar. That's what Epstein did. He found girls that were living in trailer parks or.
They have family that's not going to be concerned. They're not going to be looking for them.
Or disenfranchised.
Yes, exactly. So
lack of self-esteem.
He had a relative in Spain. That relative went to visit him while he was in prison. She made the announcement on John Paul Jr.'s page. Okay, I didn't do it. How did I know? I read social media.
So was John Paul in prison in Spain?
No, he wasn't in prison. He sailed there. And then Paul Cully found the boat was up for sale in an Italian magazine.
Right.
Now he changed the name.
Yeah.
Now that's a big mystery on our timeline exactly when that name was changed, because he originally asked his son to do this. Now his son, Michael Paul, met Collingwood. She went by the nickname Susie. They went to the Dry Tortugas for a little sail ride together.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a nice name.
And what happened was when that was one trip that he made, because he would use his son to come down. You come down, I'll pay you $150 a day.
Yeah.
Don't worry, help me sail the boat. I mean, ridiculous. He always got the short end of the stick. It was Junior who was the fair-haired boy.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
So now, the next trip he made, he goes, "Where's Susie? She disappeared." Now, his son had enough instincts and knows about his father's, anger and his temper issues and the fact that Chalice went missing. So he red flagged it, and because his father wanted him to take off and sail with him, and I want you to get on the dinghy and change the name of the boat. Now that was probably before he actually lowered the boat and island rod and took off. Okay, that's the only conclusion I can come up with, because the couple in the Fiji Islands saw it as Island Girl. He now changed the name to Diamond Girl. So I don't know where that actual name change and who did the painting on that. But Michael Paul got red flagged because he goes, "How can I sail around the world? I don't even have a passport." So he figured this is going to be a one-way ticket.
You think he was going to kill his own son?
I think he would. Yes.
He was going to kill his own son.
I think he would have.
You're saying that this
Absolutely.
socio-psychopath was going to kill his own son.
Yeah.
But his son wasn't
he doesn't even have a passport.
So do you think he was going to kill him?
He got up early in the morning and took off and flew out and never seen his father since.
But do you think
that's
crazy?
Since 2000, okay? We're in 2025.
Do you think, 25 years, do you think that, what was John Paul's needing of his son? Just to change the name? Or do you think he was going to have him?
I think he was just going to use him until he didn't need him anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Move the boat, do this, do that, whatever. Right. Just use him, and if he
if he went into ports of call, what was he going to do? He has no passport. He can't even ID who he is.
Right, and I guess he would have maybe he knew how to get him a passport in a foreign country like Haiti, or so maybe he had something thought out.
Well, the person who was the engraver was from.
Well, who makes the fake style? That's crazy. You've done your homework.
Your Satellite Beach.
So
okay.
Yeah, so you've done your homework. Crazy. So what you're saying is,
I know approximately where he lives. I don't know if he's alive.
Well, I don't need a fake passport, so it's okay. So what you're saying is, not today anyway, but what you're saying is he was probably going to use his son, and if he worked out, he would let him stay with him. If he decided one day to get rid of him, he'd kill him.
Well, Michael Paul had enough common sense
to get off the boat.
Instincts to know. Since he was with a girlfriend, he says, "Get rid of the girlfriend. You don't need her. You're coming with me. We're going to sail." He goes, "I don't even have a passport." The girlfriend left first. She's like, "I'm out of here."
Yeah.
So
good for her.
So, anyways, he went to Spain, and then the boat was trying to be sold in Italy, and then he ended up in England. How do I know? U.S. Marshals. Finally, I was bombing them with information, and they finally came and met with me. And, I gave them all the documentation and research I had to date. And that was December 2012, after the show broke on ID Network. They said, "It's time for us to meet and talk." Okay. And I saw photos of John Paul with, a facelift. Of course, he made himself look younger. And they said, "Well, did you have anything to do with the extradition in England?" I'm like, "No." And they said, "Well, we missed him by a day." So they had a tail on him. They actually.
This is the U.S. Marshals.
Yeah, U.S. Marshals even saw him in Fiji Islands, but they couldn't pick him up.
Right, but
for a charge. You understand? They were tailing him. But
why couldn't they pick him up? They have to go to Fiji police and get authorization.
Well, they have to prove that he actually killed Colleen. Now they have a lot.
But wasn't he on the run from he skipped bond, didn't he?
He was on parole violation. Yes. Yeah. Immediately.
But why couldn't they get him to hold him in Fiji Islands for parole violation? They don't have jurisdiction maybe at the time.
No.
For something like that.
And he was smart. He would go places where you couldn't actually.
Right. Well, I know plenty of criminals that when they were on the run, they go to Costa Rica at the time. Let's say if you're
James
Jewish.
Sullivan went there.
If
that's another story.
I don't know.
Story.
I don't know that story.
He hired a guy to dress up like the clown and kill his wife at the front door. And
right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I guess serving a life sentence.
Yeah.
Yes. They found him on a Thai beach from America's Most Wanted, who John Walsh, I love. I've worked with him before.
He's I know the Walsh as well.
I followed him closely on all his shows.
I was in the mall, again, not to go back to my book, but I was in the mall the day looking for Adam. going to Sears, me and a friend of mine, to buy some stuff to do a smuggling trip. And while I was in there, I ran into Nancy and Reve and a bunch of people looking for Adam, and we went and looked for Adam that day.
Really?
But yeah, and I met I met Reve a few times. I met John Walsh, and he's an amazing man.
Yes.
It's just that he's dedicated his life. He's an amazing man. I give him all the props in the world. John Walsh, amazing man, really. So let's give John Walsh and America's Most Wanted and the Walsh family.
Well, America's Most Wanted is back. It's not on network television, but it is back.
Right.
He had another show called In Pursuit, and I worked in the film industry, so I do locations, and I'm a location manager. I worked on that for his trailer In Pursuit, up in Vero Beach, because he lives there and he has a farm. You know, he plays polo and everything.
Who goes? John Jr.? Not John Sr.
No, John Walsh.
Yeah, but John Sr. No, I'm sorry. I said John Walsh is riding horses.
Oh yeah, he's an avid polo player.
Good for him.
And so we talked and everything, and I told him about the reenactment scenes we did on the James Sullivan case. We used our own restaurant. We used to own a prominent restaurant, and Elaine Parent, who was another female serial killer. Not too many of them.
No.
So we did reenactment scenes at our restaurant. So
by the way, my wife is enthralled with serial killers.
It's wonderful. So Colleen is still considered a missing person. John then fled from England, allegedly, to Thailand. And U.S. Marshals had been working with the Thai government then, but things weren't as easy as they are now. And we're going to get up to current events.
But when did he first land in Thailand then? What year was that?
That was, he sailed to the South Pacific. So I'm saying early 2000s.
Okay, so still 20-something years ago.
2002, 2000, I don't have the timeline. Yeah, obviously U.S. Marshals has a case file that's probably about this thick, and a lot of that information I gave to them. They gave me special thanks. That's another story, because they found him. Okay. Should we go up to current events?
Yeah.
Okay, they found him. Okay, this has not been in a racing magazine or a newspaper clipping or anything, but I know for a fact that they found him. And it was a month after Chalice finally was listed as an official missing person with the Doe Network, the biggest database of missing persons. And the director, who's the director of the state of Florida, contacted me. She said, I contacted you 8 years ago. I said, I don't remember talking to you. But anyways, it was very frustrating. 44 years working on this, and she was just a ghost. I made her an internet star by building a website, chalicepaula.com, and then, during COVID, shut down, I started the podcast, and, I have no financing, no funding from outside sources, no sponsorship. I did it all on my own, and everybody on there is true to form, and they're people that either knew John Paul, knew Chalice, or people, law enforcement that I interviewed that were retired law enforcement who came and also participated in the podcast. And of course, myself, I give updates, etc. But at Friends of Chalice, we started out with that. The first segments of it was
we're going to
about Chalice.
Not to interrupt you, but we're going to list all that in this podcast so that you guys can go to Lisa's podcast, Lisa's Facebook site, Lisa's website, chalicepaul.com, and really we're going to put it all out there because you've got to follow this woman. This story is getting to the...
There's a newspaper clipping. There's everything.
You wouldn't believe it.
Pit pass that John Paul actually signed, saying, to Chalice, our secret weapon. I love you, John. Now that's kind of, morbid in itself, okay?
I mean, after she was dead.
No, this is when they were still alive. She made her own scrapbook. I found the scrapbook by finding her old roommate, okay?
Oh, man,
I mean, we're jumping around all over the place, but actually... When
we'll tell the story now from where it's
when she was going to be in Sharky's Machine, she was in Cannonball Run. We didn't finish her acting debut. Was going to be in Sharky's Machine. She was going to qualify for SAG, and Burt Reynolds loved her.
So
he was very excited, and she was renting a room from the casting agent for Old John's movie. Her name's Anne Fazier. I had her written phonetically. I found her years later. Because of the address, and I had my scout, because I built a library houses in Atlanta for locations, and I sent him to archive records, and he finally found it, and I had it misspelled all these years on a little piece of paper. I finally found this woman who was living outside Atlanta, Cornelia, Georgia, And, I spoke to her daughter. She goes, yep, he killed her. I said, how do you know? She goes, well, she left all her personal belongings behind in my mother's house,
Wow.
She left her
Wow,
wig.
wow,
She
wow,
left,
wow,
I'm getting
wow,
goosebumps. The fur coat that she wore all the time, okay?
She had planned to come back. She was
She was
not
coming
planning.
back. And I talked to her when I was in New York City. I said, Chalice, don't go. I feel something terrible because I
Oh,
knew
really?
John Paul was,
So you had to-
volatile.
so-
I had a conversation with her on the phone. Don't go to Florida, Chalice. She goes, oh, don't worry, Lisa. It's like we're going on a second honeymoon. He has a house on the water, Merritt Island. He has a boat. We're going down to the Keys. We're going to sail down the Keys. I'm going down. We're going to reunite. And then I'm coming back. I'm going to be in Bird's movie within a week, okay?
So, but just so people know, to get a SAG, you have to have speaking part and have so
Right.
much time as a speaking part. So just it's the next level. And once you're in SAG, you can get insurance and all the other things that
She
come.
knew
with it.
high profile people. She knew Mike Manafort. He was head of Orion Pictures. Okay, I
Really?
met him with Chalice for the screening of Excalibur in Atlanta. Yes, I mean she was a
on
first
the
class flight attendant. She met everybody. She was friends with Ted Turner,
Really?
Mike Connors. Remember the TV show Mannix?
Of course.
And then Wayne Newton. Wayne Newton loved her. She could fly with her girlfriends, when she had time off and get free flights to Los Angeles. Front
anywhere.
row seats. Her girlfriend, Kathy Kayla, another flight attendant, on my podcast too, will explain that story. I mean, she was drop dead gorgeous. She'd walk in a room, and Kathy used to say she would just go in and sit first. She'd say, Chalice, let me go in and sit first because I want to see every man turn their head when you come in. And it's honest to God, she was that gorgeous. She would turn heads of why every man would be looking at her when she walked in the room. She
And
was
how
charismatic.
this little...
She had it all going for her. She was going to be an aspiring screen actress. She had all the connections to make this happen. And what happens? She disappears in Key West.
So no,
Probably by John Paul.
well, so we know that
Most likely, 100%, John Paul is the number one
But
suspect.
what I was going to say is anybody that wants to be in the film or a rock musician or anybody that wants that is never going to throw all that away once on the cusp of getting it. It just makes no sense.
And she didn't go on some expedition to go to Caicos. Number one,
No.
she wasn't big on the water. Okay, this wasn't a dream. She wanted to be in this film bad.
Yeah.
So what happened was she left her scrapbook behind. Everything that's on that website came from her scrapbook, including the pit pass on there that he signed. Now, why would she be a secret weapon? She's a flight attendant. Nobody searches flight attendants. That's the only conclusion I could come up with.
Well,
I
maybe
know
she was.
she flew to the Bahamas and took money back for him.
Oh, really?
Of course, she told me that herself.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
So tell the story today where because we jump back in time a little bit. This story is so, remember, it's not us. It's just such a twisted web of lies, deceit, con arting, everything John Paul has done. That this story just weaves like, what did you say, like a road course?
Yeah,
like
it's
a
got
twisting
more
road. Yeah.
twists and turns than a racetrack.
Yeah,
For
you
sure.
really nailed it. So, where are we at today with the John Paul story? Let's close out with that.
John Paul was apprehended after Chalice was finally listed as an official missing person on February 1st, 2025. I was notified, told me to keep it under wraps. They were looking for him. They worked with Interpol. They worked with the Thai government, the Royal Thai Police, okay, our State Department, and of course, U.S. Marshals. They all worked together as a task force. They found him. I don't think it was that difficult. He didn't leave Phuket, even though there was all this speculation. Oh, he left. He went back to the Netherlands, or he went somewhere else where he can't be extradited, or he's dead. Everybody had a story to tell, okay? But I believe he just never left. He never left there.
So wasn't he was, I think you said at one time that he was running a dive shop there.
Yes.
And then he ended up working with this other woman, and she's got this all on her website.
I think this Thai woman is somebody he formed a trust level with, who actually carried on to other businesses that are still open and operating in Thailand.
Wasn't he running
under
a
an
daycare?
assumed name?
Wasn't he running a child daycare or something like that?
Yes, a children's school. Isn't that nice? An alleged serial killer is running a children's school, international children's school. And
It's crazy.
clearly labeling it as,
Crazy.
American, Holland, Dutch, connection, Thai connection.
So they
there
can
we
learn all the
go.
languages, and you can travel the world with this guy.
And it's a
unbelievable.
$10,000 per child entry fee. He was in charge of the financing.
Of course.
And, academics from America. Not only that, he was also used in stock photos for a rehab clinic, which she since has pulled off of the internet.
So,
but we have them, don't
If
worry.
you see on her
Here's
website,
a wanted international fugitive who's advertising his face and body for a rehab clinic for elderly people. That blows me away.
So-
I just can't believe it. I can't believe it.
wait. So he had an elderly care division and a child care school division.
Anything to make a buck.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have it's kind of funny. A guy that goes around killing people is actually healing people and trying to raise kids. Maybe he was trying to turn his life around.
No,
I know better. No, we
I
know
don't
better.
believe it at all.
No.
He passed away on September 29, 2025. We're
So
still
what?
waiting on the documents. That's what I was told.
So you're saying that
Okay.
John Paul Sr. was arrested by the Thai police.
He was held in immigration detention for 5 months. He was going to be deported back. Same thing they did in 1986 in Switzerland, because he was operating under an alias by the name of John McCoy. Okay, and he was actually came in with a fake Belize passport into the country of Thailand. That was enough cause to get him out. Plus, he was on parole violation, tax evasion. He's 86. He come back here. He's going to jail. You're not getting out, pal. You're 86. But his health failed.
So he died in a Thai prison.
In a hospital.
You said from water on the lungs or something.
It was associated with some sort of
pneumonia. Pneumonia.
Yeah.
So, sadly,
that I was told. I'm waiting on the documents.
You see, I say to Lisa, until we see proof that there's a body, we don't. I mean,
you're never going to see a body because we already signed a paper. I had his son sign a paper, so that way it was notarized and everything with identification that he wanted his remains. So we are in the works. I do have a live family member who's working with me on this. So he's already verified it. I don't need to hear people on Facebook or other social media outlets thinking I'm a quack. No. I'm not telling the truth. There's no reason why I would lie about it. I wanted him back alive.
Well, that's what I was saying.
I want him back alive so I can interview him and say, John, where's the bodies? Right. Okay? Now, you're in a federal detention. It's up to him. Things have changed now. It's not like you go in a room and you talk to a prisoner. Okay?
No.
You have to talk behind glass.
You have to use a phone.
And use a phone. And
or
then
you have to
be on the list for visitation.
He has to allow you.
He has to allow you. He has the controls over that, not you.
Well, he wasn't going to allow you to come.
Well, he would want, the right media outlet because that was his ego and personality. Yeah. He would have loved to have a film made about him, which probably still will be done. My motive is to do a film about the missing, because I'm a victim's advocate. I'm about the victims, not about making John Paul more infamous than he already is, okay? Yes, racing comes into it because it's sexy, okay? You put in racing.
Well, he was a racer. That's what he was.
Yes,
I mean,
he
was a financier. But
and then you have the romance thing going on with Chalice and then Colleen and Hope Haywood and all these other characters that came into this. But the bottom line is, this all was covered up on Chalice.
But it was
all covered up.
He's a murderer is what he is.
He's absolutely.
Yeah.
An alleged serial killer.
He's
not just a solo, multiple people.
Right, but from what you're saying is, so just to close out where it is today, he was found in Thailand, obvious, other than, his age, changing his looks and plastic surgery and fake ID. He was arrested, and while he was getting ready to be deported back to America to face, his charges here, he died in the hospital.
Yes.
So 44 years you've been chasing him.
Yeah, what a letdown that is.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
But you don't have to worry about looking out the window.
But on the flip side, any racers out there who are afraid to talk, come talk to me now. You got a story, you got something interesting, come talk to me. Because
about this.
About him, about the past.
Right.
Because there were so many people when I first started, investigating this full throttle in 2009. John Paul Jr.'s significant other tried to block me and, badmouth me, and I got attacked. I was, should go back under the rock I crawled out from when I was a terrorist. Why would you protect a man who's responsible for what you know? One missing person, Chalice's story, I did not break out on the internet until after I found out about Colleen Wood. And all that came out in 2012. In the meantime, 3 years, I did aggressive research and investigative work.
Without saying anything to anybody.
Well, I mean, I investigated a lot of law enforcement.
I'm saying, but you didn't put it
I
out
have a
there.
whole list. I went to Georgia.
What I'm saying is you didn't put it out for the general public.
No.
And in fairness, and I'm not saying in fairness, but I could see where Trish, John Paul Jr. was still alive. She wants this to go away because she doesn't want it on her, her life.
A lot of people wanted me to go away and shut up and don't talk about it because it's over. Because they're complicit. I don't care what you say. Anybody that knew this woman went missing and didn't go to the authorities and didn't do anything about it, you're complicit. Especially since they've got the benefit from John Paul Sr.'s crimes, okay? You know how much a race car driver makes. Can they afford 2 cars, Porsches, Mercedes, travel all over the world, and live, the life of leisure?
All that's paid for by drug money.
Okay, come on.
You win a race. I mean, if you're a Formula One driver in today's world, you make a lot of money, but these guys weren't. They were not. They were self-funding their racing. He wasn't. John Paul Jr. would have been put into a race car, and what he would have made was a flat, small fee and whatever winnings. I mean, he wasn't. It's not back then. There was no money in drive. A driver had usually what they were doing was owning a race team, so nobody was getting a salary. They were just racing, and yeah, I understand. I mean, it's
just see how passionate I am about this even.
Oh,
now.
I know.
I mean, this has been 44 years of my adult life.
Oh, it's crazy.
So, and I'm not getting emotional now because I'm on camera, but I've had my emotional moments of thinking that this young, beautiful woman had her whole life ahead of her, just gone. And no investigation. That's the worst part. It's time for them to do something. Time for them to still do something about it, to find out who helped him stay on the lam for the last 15 years. Okay?
Right.
Because he went on the lam in 2000, this year 2025. Living and running businesses, and there's money, and you follow the money, find the culprit. So should this woman in Thailand get all his income? So, dirty money, dirty blood money. Okay, I'm adamant about this. I would like to start now. Before we end.
Well, I want you to tell everybody how to get in touch with you.
I want the Chalice Act to go into effect, where a non-relatable person could actually start an investigation on somebody, because there's a lot of people who are close to their friend, but they're not close to their family, their sister, their brother, their mother's sister. They're estranged or whatever. But the friend knows everything. Why can't a friend open up an investigation?
I want you to, we're going to close out the show and maybe have you back because you're a phenomenal guest. This story is incredible. I can't tell you guys enough to go into all Lisa, and we want Lisa to go tell all the different places where they can see the story. I've had the luxury prior to this interview of researching this, and seeing what she's put out. Incredible stuff.
So if you're interested, go to chalicepaul.com. It's like Alice with CH in the front. And there's a link there for the podcast, which is called Chalice Paul Disappeared, the True Story.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa tells a great story. It's so, like you said, it's got more turns and curves than a road racing course. And this has been one of the great interviews. We're going to send you links to all of her sites. Thank you so much for coming in.